want to see something really scary?
You bet.
I'll tear your soul apart.
Jesus Christ!
No, it's not.
Now, was that civilized? No, clearly not. Fun, but in no sense civilized.
Just when I thought I was out of doing the whole YouTuber list show thing, they pull me right back in. When Trivial Theater gives the call for you to spotlight the best of horror subgenres, you just have to do it! And now I'm doing it. Now, part of the rules of this, as to the best of my understanding, is that I am to pick out my favorite film of each particular subgenre in the horror genre. And these are the subgenres laid down in the previous video that Trivial Theater did. And I do, again, as per usual, even though you should already be doing it before I even say it, subscribe to Trivial Theater. Her channel is, c'est magnifique. And I'm not just saying that because the founder did an incredible crossover with her on Lair of the White Worm. I'm saying it because her channel is freaking amazing, and you all need to jump on it post-haste. There are 10 subgenres to which I have to spotlight my favorite of that particular subgenre. Aha! I just made wine appear. Then at the end of the video, I will tag 4 YouTubers who will also talk about their favorites in the 10 subgenres that I have just mentioned. The zombie genre is one I've had nothing but the utmost respect for ever since I saw Dawn of the Dead. The reason why I love it is that the primary focus of it is always on the psychological ramifications that usually tends to come from the arrival of The Walking Dead. Yes, that show too. And in all the greats, particularly the ones by George Romero, he always had some kind of underlying subtext that, usually tended to reflect upon society. But the one that I'm going to name as my favorite zombie movie is in fact a recent release. And that one, it comes from Korea, and it is Train to Busan. I've seen many great zombie films in my time, and many of them had made me feel a range of emotion, from sheer horror to shock to being just full-blown appalled. And some of them I laughed my ass off. But there's not been one, even in the best days of The Walking Dead, has never made me feel as emotionally compromised as I did watching Train to Busan. Train to Busan is a film that has such an incredible grasp of character evolution that I don't think I've ever seen a zombie film been able to tackle it as well as this one has. There are characters in the beginning that either come off as incredibly irritating or incredibly annoying, or ones that you want to punch, and as the progression of the film goes, by the end of it, I was freaking bawling when certain characters died. I was in wreck at the very end of it. And beyond that, the situation of having zombies on a train, not just a train, but a fast train, and it is unrelenting. This movie does not stop for anything. Even when you think it's just slowing down, all of a sudden something new happens that just completely kicks you in the nuts. Oh, I gotta rest for a bit. Oh, shit! That's this movie in a nutshell. And to date, it has been the best zombie movie I've seen in this subgenre. And if you have not seen this movie because you have some weird-ass prejudice towards subtitles, how the hell are you even on your phone? You read every single second of every single day. I'm pretty sure you're going to have no problem reading subtitles. So watch this movie, you freaking hypocrite. Vampires has been kind of a tricky subgenre for me because there was a point where I was just done with them. I was done with them like a lot of people were at a particular time. Most people are going to think this feeling came about because of the Twilight Saga. I actually have no real beef against the Twilight Saga. As time has gone on, I've now come to the realization why vampires are such a vital subgenre in the history of horror. Because let's face it, vampires compared to any other monster kind of represent the shadow of what we as humanity always kind of obsess over when it comes to prolonging life. And they kind of are like the hollow shell of the humans that we used to be, where we sacrificed our humanity for the sake of living forever. And then we come to the realization as we keep living on how hollow existence truly is without the benefit of human connection. And not only that, the fact that we lose the capacity to cherish life, because if life has no end, then what's the point of embracing it? And if there's one movie I feel that has come out recently that has perfectly embodied that concept to the hilt, and I have talked about this on Narcotic Casserole in one of our previous Halloween Rare Delicacies, the movie is Only Lovers Left Alive. This is a vampire movie that does not play by the traditional vampire movie rules. In fact, when the studios wanted Jim Jarmusch to add in some action scenes and a bit more gore and blood, he actually deliberately wrote those out and just decided to focus entirely on this very poignant and very beautiful, and even in some ways to look at it, very tragic love story about two vampires who, one has actually become very disenchanted with life and is on the cusp of suicide, and the other one who still has, after all this time, been able to find ways to embrace life. And you find out that really only the two of them are able to coexist, or able to exist in the arms of each other, because that's truly what life is. It is an incredibly beautiful film, buoyed by absolutely career-defining performances by Tilda Swinton, Tom Hiddleston. It's an absolutely beautiful vampire film. Definitely one that you don't watch for the scares. Absolutely gorgeous to look at. It is hilarious. It is sad, but it is also utterly, utterly awe-striking, and I do recommend it to the nth degree. Of course, when you're talking about vampires, by some weird necessity, you gotta talk about werewolves. And I can kind of see why these two are always pitted against each other. Whereas vampires are always more civilized and more collective, the werewolf, it always seems to more represent mankind's desire to want to unleash the animal self. And with that in mind, I couldn't really come up with just one favorite on this, so I had to cheat and do two. And the reason why I'm doing two in this instance is because these two movies have been constantly pit against each other as to which one's the better one. And when I finally saw the other, I realized these are two movies that are so drastically different from each other that it's really pointless to compare the two, much less determine which one is the favorite. So I decided, fuck it, and named these two as my favorite werewolf films. The one, which is pretty blatantly obvious, American Werewolf in London, and the second, The Howling. I saw The Howling just recently. It was always pitted against American Werewolf in London, and when I finally saw it, I came to the realization these are two movies that are so drastically different in their approach to the concept of the werewolf. American Werewolf in London focuses more on a person who is burdened with the curse of being a werewolf, who does not want to forfeit their humanity, even in the face of the ethical ramifications of doing so. He knows that to prolong his life is going to lead to more suffering, but simultaneously he also knows that killing himself is in a way a forfeiture to the curse that he has been saddled with. So this is about a person resisting this curse that he's been stricken with. Whereas on the Howling side, this is an entire movie about people wanting to succumb to their animalistic urges. This is about people who decide to throw off the shackles of morality and just say, you know what, I want to eat, I want to fuck, I want to kill. And this movie focuses on this hidden society of werewolves that live outside the fringes of common human society. But unfortunately, when those people get too drunk on this unbridled, ravenous, animalistic, passion, they end up bleeding out into our society, and they cause pain and suffering among other people who are not so quick to sacrifice their own humanity. And it is utterly hypnotic, and it's an outstanding film. Both of these films do such a great job of spotlighting both sides of the inner turmoil that comes from being a werewolf that I really couldn't find a favorite between these two. So I've just said, no, both of these are my favorite. But if there's any subgenre that all the politicians, including the cursed Merry White House, have decided to trot out to try and beleaguer the horror genre as nothing more than trash and absolute detriment to society, that would be the slasher genre. And it's funny that that's the one that people always say is like the curse, the blight on society, because that's the one that reflects society the most, because there's nothing more relatable than the idea of someone going absolutely nanners, picking up a knife or a machete or what have you, and laying waste to anyone in their immediate vicinity. And I suspect that's why people have a weird aversion to slashers. Me, on the other hand, whenever I am in the mood to just watch something just balls to the wall, crazy, psychotic, or just sometimes, depending on the movie, a lot of fun, a lot of times I'm going to defer over to the slasher genre. Now, I've said many times in Deep Cuts, many horror films actually don't scare me, which means that any of the ones that actually do affect me on any sort of level, that is a movie that deserves to be paid attention to. Now, my number one film in this regard I'll talk about at a later time, but if there's one horror film I watched the first go around that disturbed the absolute fuck out of me, but I wanted more, that has to be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I have sung praises onto the sequel, but I have not really got focused on why I love the original so much. Now, a lot's been said about what Tobe Hooper intended with this film. Many people said that there was a lot of political undertones to the film, but a great horror film, or even a great film for that matter, is meant to be enjoyed on multiple levels. Sure, you can think about the intentions of the filmmaker. Sure, you can think about the subtext, but if you can actually sit down and actually watch a film just on the surface level and still get some kind of visceral reaction out of it, that's when the film succeeds. And the Texas Chainsaw Massacre succeeds in spades. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a film that wears its low budget stripes proudly. And frankly, I just don't like the idea of seeing it with any higher budget than pretty much what they had for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Anytime I've ever seen Texas Chainsaw with a higher budget, it just never felt right. It always felt too glossy. It always felt too clean. It felt too Hollywood. Whereas the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I felt like I needed a shower the first time I watched this film, because the film was so raw and so rough, and I could have swore that Tobe Hooper had hired not even local actors, but people who were legitimately batshit insane. And when the movie culminates in that incredible dinner scene at the very end, I was right there with Sally Hardesty, where I was like, I want to get the fuck out of this room right now. And the scene just goes on, and it does not let go. And quite literally, right when Sally is even able to inch away from the Sawyer family and bust out that window, even that gave me a sigh of relief, even though I knew she still wasn't out of danger yet. And it all boils up into that spectacular final 5 minutes of the movie, which still haunts me to this very day. And yet, whereas most movies that haunt me, I don't want to see again, this is one I actually always find myself gravitating back to. It is a masterpiece, and it is a film that I think really needs to be studied on so many levels, and I love it. Now, the found footage genre. I'm not saying I hate this genre, far from it. I saw Blair Witch in the theaters like everyone else, and I thought it was an incredible cinematic experience. Unfortunately, it was one of those experiences that I really could only enjoy the one time. And I discovered my major problem with the subgenre is that in order for the footage to be found, the people who were filming the footage in all likelihood would have died. I know where this is gonna go, and lo and behold, most of the found footage films I've ever seen pretty much have always ended that way. The only exception to this rule was the movie Chronicle. But if there's any genre where found footage belongs and it's its home and really is its most effective, is the horror genre. But if there's any found footage franchise that has been able to take the concept and do amazing things with it, not just through one film, but multiple, I've already talked about the first one, but I'm going to talk about both of them. That's right, Creep 1 and Creep 2. The first Creep, as you remember, I saw on Rare Delicacies for Halloween with Man Bites Media. Well, immediately after I watched that one, I loved that one so much, I had to go watch the second one. And the second one did not disappoint. Both of these films are spectacular, and I've even heard rumors that there's a third one in the works, which I am excited for. This is a film that takes the entire found footage genre and just completely turns it on its head. Most of found footage films are always the victims themselves doing the filming. In this one, no. Yeah, it starts off one way, but then as it develops and as it goes on, it becomes more and more uncomfortable. But it becomes uncomfortable in ways that most other found footage films aren't. Most other ones are just all about, did you see that? Oh. Whereas Creep is all about the awkwardness of human interactivity. And that's the thing that really makes both these films work.
Are you ready to go?
Wow, you're a tough nut to crack.
It's about this very eccentric killer character and how he interacts with other people and how they react to him. The first film, where the protagonist filmmaker is absolutely dumbfounded and just does not know how to take this guy and is kind of freaking out. Whereas in the second film, you have this YouTuber who's trying to find unique and interesting and eccentric individuals to spotlight for her YouTube show. She runs into him, and all the tricks that he tried with one person fail for another person. And in fact, in the beginning, he puts cards on the table to reveal who he is, just to get a reaction out of her. And he does that very early in the film, and that puts you in a completely different mindset than you were in the first film. And it's genius. And even better, it does not end even remotely the way the first one ends, and even more so, you're wondering where it's going to go from there. And if it is true that they're making a third one, I really want to see where it goes. Now, for the next subgenre, we're going for international. We're going abroad. This film's great not as a zombie film, but more as a love letter to the craft of low-budget filmmaking. And not just low-budget filmmaking, low-budget horror filmmaking. And it came out of Japan, and it is absolutely amazing. And I strongly recommend anyone who has ever had the inclination to make a horror film or any kind of film, you need to watch One Cut of the Dead. One Cut of the Dead it's a perfect film. The thing that makes it special is the execution. The whole film started as a 37-minute short film, the whole exercise of seeing if they can do a zombie film in one continuous camera shot, and the whole thing goes on for 37 minutes. And that's how it started as a short film, but then they expanded it beyond. And frankly, I've never seen a film like this, or even a concept like this, since Noise is Off. And then it becomes something so much more fun, so much more hilarious, but ultimately in the end, so much more joyous. How often is it that you find anything in the horror genre that you can describe as joyous? But suffice to say, at the end of the film, it is so triumphant, it is so beautiful. And I laughed, punched the air, much like a lot of the great low-budget films that we have talked about on Deep Cuts. This is the kind of film that, frankly, filmmakers need to watch to get them up off their ass to want to make their own films. This is an outstanding film, and if you have not seen it, you are doing yourself a disservice. It is absolutely perfect. Now we're delving into the realm of science fiction, and of course, when people think of science fiction in the terms of horror, most of the times they're going to think of this, or they're going to think of all the other knockoffs that usually tend to involve a giant alien raping someone, and that's just icky. So I decided to point the spotlight at another science fiction horror film that most people, funny enough, don't actually think of science fiction, when really, when you think of all the ingredients, it actually is science fiction, and that's actually funny to think about. But the film that I'm going to label as one of the best science fiction horror films of all time, on the surface, it starts off as a gothic horror story with all the common ingredients: graveyards, mortuaries, tall, pale people with gruff demeanors, the kind of stuff that you would see in, like, say, classic Hammer horror films. But then as you delve deeper into the film, all of a sudden you're realizing that, nope, they're nothing of the sort. They're basically pan-dimensional beings that are harvesting our dead to create a slave race. And that's when you realize, oh, it's not spiritual, it's entirely science fiction. But even then, the Phantasm film series still has this wondrous, dreamlike atmosphere, which, many can attribute to either being psychological, or it could even be, just this whole symphony of the mind. The thing I love about the Phantasm series as a whole is that it never wants to peg itself down as to one kind of franchise. I mean, all the films have the common ingredients. The tall man, these guys, and of course the crushed up zombie Jawas. But ultimately, in the end, it's still about aliens trying to harvest our dead. And that is what makes Phantasm a truly unique science fiction horror movie. Oh, and then we're getting into torture porn. There was a wave of these films that popped up in the early 00s. I suppose the mindset that led to the creation of this genre was that we had tapped into every other kind of fears on the face of the planet, but there's one thing that most people tend to fear more than anything else. The thing that usually tends to keep us from doing things that, seem risky is because we fear pain. And I get the mindset from it, but for a cinematic experience, unless you know what you're doing, that can make for a very unpleasant experience for the viewer, which means that there are very few torture porn movies that I would say I legitimately like. One film I was almost about to put as my favorite on this was the movie Hostel. It's a film that I have fond memories of when I watched it, but I don't feel the need to ever watch it again. In lieu of the fact that Eli Roth had such a great grasp on his audience's mindset, he puts the audience through hell through the bulk of that movie, but the final 10 minutes of that movie gives such a satisfying payoff that it makes everything that comes leading up to it worth it. But I just watched a film which is considered to be a classic, and one of the ones that actually heavily influenced Eli Roth in the making of Hostel, so much so that the director even showed up in the film. But but I watched it recently, and I came to the realization this is a great film even beyond just being a torture porn film, and that is Audition. The interesting thing about Audition is that the final 15 minutes overshadow the rest of the film. This is a movie that takes its time. This is a film that really builds up to that last 15 minutes and does so with a story involving a person who is doing something that, yeah, is extremely unethical and you would condemn him, but because the movie takes the time to write him so well and to understand his motivations for why he's doing it, you can't really begrudge him. And that's a great move, because when it eventually leads to this notorious, climax, you actually are feeling bad because you realize that this is a person who entered into the sham specifically because he actually did want to connect with another human being. But unfortunately, in wanting to connect with another human being, the reason why he connects with this person is because she herself is damaged on her own level. And he goes through the film trying to, find out more about her, stuff that she's not willing to reveal. And he is seeing all these red flags pop up and people warning him to stay away. But because he connects with her on a certain level, he can't resist it. Even in the aftermath of it, they play with the idea of whether or not any of that actually happened. And you're not sure, even though Takashi Miike has attested that, yes, all that happened, but the final product leaves you wondering whether or not any of that took place at all. And it really is left all to you as to whether or not any of that took place. Get back to me later on that. And then you've got the home invasion film. It's funny, I never really thought about the home invasion film because really when I think about those, I tend to slot them in with slashers, because one of the common things that happens with a lot of slasher films is, well, a lot of times it's people in their house and a slasher is coming in to kill them. So I've never really thought long and hard about the concept of a home invasion film, but so I decided to spin this one on its head, and Lynn actually pointed this one out to me, and she is absolutely right. And since I didn't really honor it in the science fiction category, I'm going to honor it now, because really when you think about it, this is a home invasion film. Because when you think about it, Alien starts off with 7 people who have been living chummy in close quarters with each other for a long time. They've gotten to know each other, who've been able to just, for fun, tell each other to fuck off. And, they love, they dig it. They have a great time. You see them in the beginning of the movie, they get along. They're great. This is their big city, their big floating city in space. And then something comes in and disrupts it and is picking them off one at a time. It invades us in probably the most personal way, and it starts stalking us one by one. And that is the loophole to which I was able to justify making it my favorite home invasion film. And now finally, the paranormal. Now, if there's anything that has been said about what generates fear, of course it's the fear of the unknown, and nothing makes you fear more than the idea of what is after this earthly plane. And there have been a lot of great films that have tackled this concept. The Haunting of Hill House is definitely a prime example. The Exorcist, pretty much most of the demonic possession films. And and of course the Conjuring films do a wonderful job talking about this. But if there's one paranormal film that I feel really hits home the multifaceted nature of the subgenre, it is The Changeling. I meant to say The Changeling, and yet I said The Conjuring. Shows how much I love it. It's not a traditional horror story in the terms of a body count or anything like that. It's not about that. If anything, it actually hits on the real core of what makes a great ghost story. A lot of times it involves a protagonist that for one reason or another is damaged, who he himself is coming to terms with some aspect of being confronted with what happens after. And this one, right off the bat, gives you something that is insanely tragic and is incredibly haunting, even before he even approaches the house, even before he goes in there. I have to give credit to George C. Scott. He is able to really show the weight of that tragedy on his shoulders, and you really get why he's so hell-bent to solve the mystery of this house. He has no personal stake in this. He has no connection with this. He just knows that there is a person, that there is a tortured spirit that is trying to get his attention, who's trying to say, I have been wronged, and that there is something that is lingering, that is basically keeping me from moving on. And the only person who can really understand it is you, because you yourself have experienced great loss. Some of my favorite ghost stories are more mysteries than horror, because a lot of it involves the protagonist trying to solve the mystery of what is torturing the spirit that is haunting this house. And I feel like The Changeling is the quintessential example of that. It is buoyed by stylish direction, incredible performances, and solid writing. And while a lot of people will say other ones like The Haunting of Hill House and even the recent Haunting of Bly Manor are prime examples, I will still maintain The Changeling is the big win. Bet you thought I forgot something, didn't you? Well, I did. That's why I'm filming it like this. But yes, as is tradition, I have to tag 4 people to tell us their favorites of the top 10 horror subgenres. But I am not going to make it so easy. I'm going to start with 2 for this video, and then a week later you are going to see my second set of 10 favorites in the horror subgenres. And then there, I'm going to tag the other 2. First person to be tagged will be the founder's kidnapper and close friend, Clowny Quinn, at the channel ThatMissQuin, a channel devoted entirely to clown media, amongst other things, including horror. Strongly recommend their channel. Follow them on Twitter as well, but we definitely recommend you put the child locks on, because there be naughty clowns there. Number 2, my close friends at the Video Nasty Project. Marvel, as the hosts of the Video Nasty Project, review every single film as featured on the infamous Video Nasties list, as laid down by the great villain of them all, Mary Whitehouse. Follow them on YouTube, they are absolutely a delight, and also join them in our revelries with the mutant family. So stay tuned on Narcotic Casserole, and think on this. What scares you?